We've spoken about thermal regulation already and how critical it is in the order of operations for our priorities of survival. Now I'd like to demonstrate how to make a proper shelter in order to take care of our warmth, particularly in the evening times. So when we begin, the first thing we want to do is account for our duff bed. Duff can be any type of dry material that has lots of loft. An example might be pine needles, dry leaves, dry grasses, anything to get us off the ground and hold on to that dead air space so that any heat that we're radiating remains within the ground below us, which is not the immediate ground, but this bed that we've created. So when you begin with your shelter, the first thing you need to do is make this bed so that you know how long and how wide it needs to be. So if I was this stick, we'll say that this is my bed. Now, one thing that people often forget when they're making duff beds is that we also need a duff comforter. And so I would use the exact same materials, gather them and place them on top of me for my comforter. So if this is approximately the size of our bed and comforter, which, by the way, if you did not have time to actually create a shelter, this type of material works to shed rain and wind and water, so you could just slide on underneath, and if this is big enough, if you collected enough of this material, you could actually stay dry and warm without sort of the housing to go with it. But if you have the time, of course, it's nice to continue to make things sturdier. So the first thing that I'll do is my campsite selection has been chosen. Let's say that my bed is faced this way, and I need something very sturdy. A Y shape is a really nice top to have, because this is where I'm going to have my ridge line coming down. I want to make sure that this piece in particular is 100% not going anywhere. If this collapses, my ridge line will collapse and the rest of the shelter will topple on me, which is dangerous and unnecessary. So do whatever you need to do, surround this with rocks, tie rope to it in other directions to make sure that it's secure. The next thing we'll do is find a proper ridge line. This ridge line should also be quite sturdy and as straight as possible. It will go over top of me, making sure that I have plenty of room in my bed with some, extra space so that I don't feel too claustrophobic. The higher my ridge line, the more air I'll have in. Perhaps it's not really, really cold outside, so I don't need it to be as tight. The colder it is outside, the more compact you want this shelter to be, so that the elements are not able to travel inside as easily. So presuming that it's fairly cold outside, I'm going to make a ridge line that gives me an area so I can sit up and be a little bit comfortable, but ultimately doesn't let too much wind in. My next step is going to be to build the sidewalls off of the ridge line. And let me back up one step. This ridge line likewise needs to be backed by something. So I could put a large rock here, I could back it up to a tree, but I don't want this stick moving at all. So that's really important. The sticks that I have, obviously this is just a small demo. I want these to be not too heavy, but I also want them to be sturdy as well. And so what I'll do is just begin by putting sticks kind of along the side. These don't have to be too close together if you're going to be adding debris to the top. If you're short on debris, I wouldn't leave so much airspace in between them. So it might look something like this, sort of the skeleton of our structure. One thing that I could also do, if my ridge line were sticking out a little bit more, would be to build perhaps like in this direction, coming around the front, which isn't necessarily where I'm going to be sleeping, but it gives me storage space for my gear to also protect it from the elements. So I could do something like that, and I still have an entranceway, which I can block off with duff material when I'm finally ready. And I'll show you how I do that when we build this large and live. The next step is going to be to add the insulation. This could be done with a lot of different things. I have pine needles, so of course this could be done with pine needles. One thing to remember is that if I start from the top, these are just going to slide down. So we'll begin at the bottom and add our insulation in a layering method towards the ridge line. Any holes are of course an issue. This is what's going to let your wind in, your rain in. The more the merrier. The more duff you have, the warmer you're going to be. So it might look something like that. I want to make sure I get these bottom edges. Other materials I could use is juniper bark. It's all over the place. We're in a pinyon juniper zone right now. This would be a little bit more of a higher mountain zone where we have our ponderosa pine needles. In this case, I can do the exact same thing, simply shingling it, sort of layering it from the bottom and moving my way upward, leaving as few holes as possible and continuing to add material as I find it, depending upon how long I'll be staying and how cold it is outside. And of course I can use a combination of materials. The last thing I found, there was a tree that was struck by lightning, and the bark was really easy to peel off. So this could be like shingling, like a roof, right? And once again I would start from the bottom and shingle my way up for added protection, mostly against the wind and the rain. Also perhaps for a little bit of comfort, keep as much light out as possible. If you're trying to sleep, something like this. And we just keep building it up. I would say that I've made this a little bit too wide because there's a lot of airspace on each side, so everything would be a little bit more compressed. And if I wanted it to be wider, then I would just go ahead and increase the width of my bed. So that's mostly a preference. Right now we are in the middle of an oak grove. It's a phenomenal place to be for a variety of resources. As you look at these oaks, a lot of them have fairly straight limbs, though they're curved on the edges and stuff. It's a strong wood, and actually what we'll be harvesting to create tripods for our rescue signals. Also, oak burns really hot and really long, so it's a great wood to put on the fire if you're looking to extend the amount of time you want it to be lit. Also, it has these wonderful leaves that come off of it, and when dry, they make a phenomenal duff, just like our pine needles and dried grasses do. So I've chosen to put my VersaCloth down at the bottom of a hill, and what I'm going to do is start towards the top of the hill and push all of these leaves down onto my VersaCloth to gather them so that I can put them on top of my shelter and create that insulatory material. I find it very helpful to have a pair of gloves on you when you do things like this, but if you don't, it's fine. All you need to do is find some sturdy sticks, and I do recommend that they're forked at the end. It's really helpful. So I'll demonstrate both with my gloves and just with some sticks. One thing that I want to mention is a number of times I've seen people, as opposed to doing it my method, kind of grab a handful of leaves and then drop it onto the VersaCloth. And it's highly inefficient, and it's just not the way to get this done. So being on a hill is great news. If you can just push that debris that littered down the hill, that's great. Even if you're on a flat surface though, still you're gonna have to use this doggy paddle method if you really want to get it done quickly and well. So get my gloves on and walk uphill a little bit. I've already laid my VersaCloth out below. Please excuse the butt shot. Now that all my leaves have been collected into my VersaCloth, I'm going to go ahead and tie up all the corners so I can carry it. The way I'll do that is go corner to corner. All right, so now I can carry this out of here, no problem, go unload it onto my shelter, come back, get another round, and continue to do this until I have whatever amount of duff I want. When it's really cold outside, I like to have a couple feet at least below me and a couple feet on top of me for my bed alone. If it's, pretty warm outside, just to have this insulatory material underneath you, just to sleep on these leaves is so much better than sleeping straight on the earth. I'm about halfway done with my shelter now. The back half is already done. I chose to start with that side because the wind is coming in this direction. So in case a storm started to roll over, I would definitely want to start with the side that's going to protect me the most and finish off with the second side, and that's what I'm about to do. But before we do that, I wanted to talk about this big Gore-Tex bivvy that I pulled in at the very beginning. This is a gift from one of my brothers, and it's something that I love to take with me. It rolls up into nothing and I can carry it in my VersaCloth along with my clothes. What I did was pack it full of duff. So I can either, if I had a blanket, sleep on top of this and then put the blanket on top of me inside the bivvy, or I can actually get in between these layers of duff and have this be my comforter and my mattress, and then have this as extra protection against the wind and the rain, and keep me nice and snugly warm. One thing that I do want to mention is that this type of shelter, with the amount of debris that I have on it, is not meant to last for a full season, for example. It's sturdy, which is good, so I'm safe. It's definitely protecting me from moderate weather right now, but with just the juniper bark and some pine needles, just to make sure that I don't have too many or any holes, that doesn't make it a permanent shelter by any means. This is semi-permanent. I would want something like this if I were out for a couple of weeks, maybe a few weeks, just to feel a little bit more at home, like I've created my space where I know that I can seek refuge if I need it either psychologically or from a storm. But if you really want to get this to be solid, you need to continue to add material. My shelter is now complete. I can tell you that I already feel toasty just sitting in here in the middle of the daytime. The last element to note is that I've left this space for me because I want an area to get in and out of. I also have a great view of an open field, which is where I've put my rescue fires. So if I see any planes come overhead or any helicopters and I want to get rescued, I will have a great visual and I can get to my 3 signaling fires very quickly. The problem with that is that there is the opportunity for weather to come in through this direction that's open. One thing that you can do is create at least some kind of a door to protect your head. So what I've done is throw everything into my VersaCloth, these nice leaves that we found, oak leaves, and I can just prop it up kind of like a door to at least cover a bit more of my space, particularly my head, right? We lose a lot of heat through our head. So I can go like this. Something like that. Or if I wanted to get farther into my shelter and I wanted to leave my pack over here, I could do this. So anyways, now that I'm all settled and my core body temperature, the thermal regulation of the human body, a very important step, is taken care of, we can move on to the next step of our priorities of survival.